Hi everyone, welcome to TEDMED's live event focusing on the great challenge on promoting active lifestyles. I'm Jane Sarasohn-Kahn and I'll be moderating today's discussion, which will run about an hour. This session is part of the Great Challenges program sponsored by the great Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. That's my opinion. The goal of the Great Challenges program is to look at 20 of the most complex problems in health and medicine. Issues that can't be solved with a magic bullet or a one-shot cure or policy. Our mission's not to solve the issues, but to share ideas from many disciplines to reach a better understanding of them than we had before. So we'll be taking questions from viewers on Google Hangout, on Facebook, and Twitter. When you use Twitter, please use the @ @TEDMED and tag your questions with the hashtag #GreatChallenges, and we'll try to get to them. As mentioned, I'm Jane Sarasohn-Kahn, and TEDMED's asked me to moderate today's event. I'm a health economist who works at the intersection of health, technology, and organizations keen to empower people, consumers, patients, and caregivers to engage in health and make good decisions with an eye toward what some call the triple aim. Let's improve healthcare quality, reduce costs, and expand access. So today we're delighted to welcome a great team of 4 experts who will call our challenge team to hold discussion on this topic. And let me introduce them to you. First, Cliff Sperber, who's Vice President of the New York Roadrunners Youth and Community Services Division. And Cliff's mission with his organization is to make running part of every child's life. Right now he's working with about 150,000 children toward that mission. Dr. Genevieve Dunton is an assistant professor in the Department of Preventive Medicine at USC, and her mission is to research and evangelize about healthy lifestyles. Stephanie Pitsirilos-Boquin is founder of Zoe Health, and she works with communities on a whole range of health and public health issues. And finally, Yolanda Savage-Narva with the campaign. She's the campaign director of America Walks. She's been in public health for a decade, currently campaign director, as I said, and her goal with her organization is to make America a great place to walk for everybody, and I sure go for that. So to warm us all up, I'll start with Cliff and ask each of you, why are you so glad to be here today on this TEDMED Great Challenge Talk to promote active lifestyles? Cliff?
Well, it's a great opportunity to evangelize, as I think you said about one of our speakers. I think all of us are very much in that business. Physical activity, active lifestyles is so critical both to public health in terms of people living long, healthy lives, which have a much better chance of being disease-free or with limited diseases because of being physically active, which reduces the burden on the medical system, reduces costs, and is just better for the country in general. But on a personal note, being physically active, having a healthy lifestyle is very much about personal empowerment, because if you're physically active and you eat well, you have a good lifestyle, you're not only doing better for your body, you're doing much better for your mind, your spirit, your energy, your capability to live, love, laugh, have fun, and make the best of your life. So it's so exciting to be a part of folks who are promoting that, and hopefully there are people out there who are going to rally with us and really make this a national mission.
That's great. I love that. Genevieve?
Hi, everybody. It's great to be part of this panel, and I, too, am extremely passionate about this subject. As a child, I was a figure skater, and I was avid athlete and excited about being physically active myself, but I became interested in it from a scientific perspective. I'm a researcher at a university, so I'm interested in it and applying the scientific method to better understanding how we can promote active, healthy lifestyles and using our theoretical guidance to understand health behavior change. And
that's great.
To understand how people change their behavior by their own personal motivations as well as how they interact with their environment. I think that there's a lot of environmental influences on our activity levels. So, so my personal goal is to better understand and disentangle these complex processes that explain how people change their behavior so we can design programs and policies to make that happen.
Super. That's great. Now, Stephanie, what's your take on this?
Well, excited, very excited to be here. Well, being physically active is so often the forgotten preventive measure, going hand in hand with eating healthy. So it's really exciting to see promoting active lifestyles as a great challenge discussion. It's really been so carved out of our lives that it demands a lot of attention and a lot of discussion. Commuting to work, the time we spend in school, the things that we do at work, social activities. It's just been so carved out of our lives. And on a personal level, working with elementary schools here in New York City, seeing how gym and active recess has been taken out, and just studying for tests, and just seeing the effects this has on health and mental health, makes it such an important topic. So those are just a few reasons why I'm excited to be here.
It's super. And Yolanda, your opinion on all this?
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Well, I'm very excited to be here today, and I can approach this from two levels, actually. Personally, I grew up in the South, and this is a place where active transportation is not accessible to everyone. So I'm passionate about promoting that and making sure that it's accessible for everyone. On a professional level, as the campaign director for America Walks, I'm very passionate about the opportunity to look at this from an advocacy point of view, to look at implementation and really help people to promote physical activity, and walking in particular. It's the oldest, most cost-effective form of physical activity, so I'm excited to really talk about that today.
That's great. Thank you all. I think we're all singing out of the same hymnal, so we can stop now. No. We're going to keep going. And we're going to start with a question that we received from a Facebook member earlier this week. So Macy Lee Henderson, if you're out there, thanks for the first question. She commented on Facebook that, quote, access to and necessity for public transportation and sustainable planned communities with high walkability scores would promote active lifestyles. With all communities facing tight budgets, and we know governors have to balance budgets, right? Congress doesn't, but governors do. What are communities supposed to do under tight budgets to encourage active lifestyles? And I believe all of you will have an opinion on this. But first, I'm going to start with Cliff, because you're working in New York in a community that's specific. So Stephanie, but tell us what your experience is. Obviously, Mayor Bloomberg is the health mayor, so you get a lot of blessing from him. But talk to us about your experience in a community with a tight budget.
Well, actually, most of our work is done in schools and community centers. Obviously, in New York, which is a great city for walking, there is a fair amount going on, though at the same token, a couple 100,000 kids a day are bused to school. I just think in general there needs to be a way of promoting a cultural mindset where people tend to freak out if they have to walk more than a block or two because they can't park in front of the store, or the bus or subway doesn't stop near their store, where actually, if you are taking public transportation, getting out a stop or two before we want to go becomes a cultural norm, because that gives you the opportunity to take a walk, and walking is good for us. It refreshes us. It rejuvenates us. And, I think we would all agree, though how we get there is difficult, that promoting that mindset where walking is good, physical activity is good, is where we need to get to.
Great. Now, I know, Stephanie, you have a take on this.
Yes, simple things like creating walking and bike groups, those are not things that cost anything, or even what we have up here in New York. We have some bike trains where you get together, you meet at a certain point, and you commute to work with a bike. At the same time, there are marketing activities. We had one again from the city of New York called Take the Stairs, and the CHALK program at New York Presbyterian Hospital, which I helped lead and create, use these stair signs, stair prompts, burn calories, not electricity. And we found that it actually statistically increased stair usage. So simple little things like that, and of course promoting these things to do at home can make a big difference.
That's
don't
great.
Require a lot of money.
Good. Yolanda, you're a queen of the walking here. So why don't you talk to us a bit about what you've learned on this issue?
Well, you know, I think budgets are tight everywhere, and because walking is such a cost-effective form of physical activity, I think we can incorporate it into everything we do. And in order to be physically active, we have to really think about, how do I fit this into my lifestyle? Can I walk to work? Can I walk during a lunch break? Can I grab a buddy and walk to the store? So I think we really have to think about how we incorporate physical activity and walking into our everyday lives, and then the cost effectiveness of it will actually, you know, give us our best return on investment.
That's great. We love that ROI, right?
Right.
Genevieve, in your research that you've done, have you studied aspects of this topic?
I'm sorry, I think I might have heard the last part of your question.
Oh, sure. I was just wondering, at your research at USC, have you studied the impact of sort of communities surrounding people to promote healthy lifestyles?
Right, right. So there's actually quite a growing body of literature that examines features of the built environment that are correlated with activity levels. And so some of the things that have shown pretty strong relationships are mixed land use, which is residential areas that are adjacent or integrated with commercial and retail areas. So so people who live near close proximity to stores and shops and restaurants and schools are you know, more able to walk to those locations. And and then we do know that cities and towns and communities that have greater residential density do show more walking too. So beyond, but I think your question is moving kind of beyond that, because I think that even though people may live in communities where they do have access to places to destinations to walk to, that doesn't mean they necessarily do it. And I think that goes back to Cliff's comments, which I think are good about addressing the issue of social norms. So it's that I think that, and it's trying to figure out how to start to change the tide in terms of what's kind of acceptable in terms of how we get from here to there. And so it may start with just targeting you know, key role models and leaders who can essentially lead the pack and encourage others to follow in modeling those types of behaviors.
Sure. And Cliff, I know you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, just one last point, if I may, that I think there's a body of research that says for folks who are sedentary, there's a huge gain just from getting up and doing some walking. Right. You know, if you're somebody who runs 3 miles a day and then you add a 4th mile, you know, that may be great for your mind and spirit. It's not going to move the needle that much for your body. But if you're sedentary and you just start to walk a bit, that can be a huge benefit to your health. And again, just a great reason to promote walking.
That's great. Now, a question was just asked online to tag on to what we're talking about. And one of our listeners asked, do any of us know any examples of towns, cities, or regions where altering the built environment has had a measurable impact on physical activity? Do any of you, can any of you cite any area that's done this and measured it?
I could jump in here. It's a great question, because the research team that I'm working with at the University of Southern California is actually conducting a project at the moment where we're using it's actually a natural experiment, which means that we're following people who move into a community that's based on smart growth urban planning principles, which there's 10 principles, but some of them include the preservation of open space, walkability, access to destinations, strategy, and we're looking at a community in the San Bernardino County in California. It's about 30 miles east of Los Angeles. It's still technically in the Los Angeles greater metropolitan area, but it's called the Preserve, and it was initially started to be built out in 2006, 2007, 2008. We started the study around then, and we are following people who move into the doing in weight and physical activity levels using an objective reported them to control individuals who live in nearby surrounding communities that are more urban sprawling in nature, and so they're not based on or a quasi-experimental design, but it's because we can't randomly assign people to live in communities. They are they do choose to move into the community, but then we compare them with individuals who are matched. But we are finding our do show higher levels of activity, a lower BMI, body mass index, than people. So these are very preliminary results, but that's about all we have.
Great. So I know our other three panelists also have an opinion on this. First, I'm going to take it from Yolanda.
I just wanted to mention I don't have a specific place, but I know that there's a big movement on repurposing spaces, and actually America Walks is having a discussion forum at the end of March that will speak specifically about that, and this is very attractive for people who are involved in active transportation, walkers, cyclists, to have a dedicated space that they can stop and relax. It's also good for the economy and the businesses that are promoting this. So I wanted to add about repurposing space and the importance of that.
That's great, and that's a green and sustainable thing to do too. So it feeds a lot of different issues. Cliff, you had a point you wanted to make to tag along Genevieve as well. Oh, Cliff, you're on mute.
Pardon me.
That's okay.
I defer to the folks who have hard research on this.
Got it.
At my disposal.
Got it. And Stephanie, do you have an addition?
Oh yeah, I was just going to point out that a former TED speaker, I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, Dan Buettner, has had success in some of his the Blue Zone projects, particularly one in Minnesota, which the city did agree to transform some of the physical spaces, and they have seen some increases in physical activity. So I would encourage the person with the question to look up the Blue Zones projects, Dan Buettner.
That's a great suggestion. And it's interesting, a lot of people might say, well, Minnesota is so bloody cold and snowy, but you can do these things around, this happens in Denmark and in Alaska and all over the world. So you don't have to live in the Central South or Southern California where Genevieve is to make this happen. An interesting question that's related to that is the following. We're really riffing on each other online, which is great. Here's the question. So when we introduce improvements like bike and walking lanes, we're also introducing safety issues. So are there any movements to increase awareness about this? And I'm going to throw it to Yolanda, again, my walking queen, to ask you, are you first, because everybody probably has experience in this. Yolanda, are you aware of any walking and biking safety discussions that are going on anywhere? You can unmute.
Thank you.
Sorry, that'll be my signal for unmute.
Yes, we're probably all on mute. The discussions are going on everywhere. I think it's very important to understand that we can promote walking, we can promote biking, but if people don't have safe, accessible places to walk and bike, they're going to be deterred from doing that. I was recently in New Jersey at a summit, and one of the major focuses of that summit was about safety for pedestrians and cyclists. And America Walks is really focusing on this nationwide, and the conversation is definitely going on. It's something that's at the top of the priority list in order to really get people out and moving. You have to have safe, accessible communities and places for people to walk.
Great. Anybody want to add to that?
This is Stephanie. I mean, I can just quickly add, moving towards bike lanes that are actually enclosed, not just having painted tracks on the street, have done wonders for increasing bike usage, particularly here in New York City. Because as a biker, it's kind of hard to compete with that huge SUV being right next to you in the left lane.
Well, here's a question related to that SUV. You know, we're all driving near Hummers, and no offense, but big gas guzzlers. And someone just asked an economics question that I think about a lot as an economist. Should cars and gas cost more to motivate us to bike, to walk, to use public transport? I have an opinion on it, but I'm the moderator, so I'm not going to talk yet. Any of you have an opinion on how the price of gas influences our public transport and motivation to get up off of our thing?
I'll jump in and
Please.
And say that though it's unfortunate, especially with times being so tough regarding money, to use the stick rather than the carrot,
Right.
motivating people to walk more. At the end of the day, it is just so important, both for society in terms of, again, the public health expense, as well as individuals' well-being to walk. And indeed, if it takes the stick with regard to motivation, I think that's something that has to seriously be considered.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's easier said and done in cities like New York City, where you can pretty much walk anywhere. But communities like rural communities, where you pretty much might have to use cars. I think that they'd be at a disadvantage if we were to do something like raising taxes. I mean, I think it would be effective, but it might put certain communities at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm just following the Twitter stream on my iPad here, and I want to bring up a couple communities that people are tweeting about, just to for people interested in that question. Reed Mansour is talking about Chicago, that toddling town being a good place that's motivating walking and the use of public transport. So keep those tweets coming in, people, because we're going to be following those as well. Let's move away from this public policy community question, because this is a complex topic to promote active lifestyles. And here's a question that's, what is the role of parents, particularly vis-a-vis children, in being role models? So one of you in particularly works a lot with kids, and that would be Cliff Sperber. Cliff, what's the interaction with parents like? Do you get tension? Are they loving you? Talk to us.
Well, it's a great question. We see a lot of appreciation from parents. We get a lot of great feedback from parents in terms of, we're so glad that the school is now doing running programs, walking programs that they weren't doing before. I mean, it'd be really interesting. A lot of us have seen that chart which shows obesity just climbing a straight line up over the last 30 years. No one has charted the diminishment of physical education over the last 30 years, but it's almost the other side of that hill. So bringing PE, physical activity, back into the schools is great, and the parents do love it. What's really kind of interesting is what we see is kids inspiring parents to get active. And we now see parents coming out to our events, to our races, who are running with the kids, who are moving with the kids, and thanking the kids for getting them engaged. So that's a two-way street.
It's great. Anyone else want to chime in on that one? Okay. In addition to parents, oh yeah, Genevieve, can we hear you? Are you on mute?
Okay, thank you. So I just wanted to chime in. We've been doing some research in parent-child pairs, and what we're interested in understanding is how much activity that they do together, and we're trying to measure this objectively. And so they're wearing activity monitors and GPS devices, which can tell us how close they are in proximity. And so what we found is pretty actually, I should say, quite disappointing levels of joint parent-child activity, meaning that parents and children do very little activity together on any given day. We do see that there's a substantial amount or reasonable amount of activity that children do with their parent nearby, but their parent is sitting. And that is kind of what you classically see at parks and playgrounds, where children are playing and parents are sitting. And then we did see some times when parents were active, but children were sitting nearby. And so what I think that what that shows is that there really are opportunities where parents and children are together, and one might be active, but the other is not. So that's just an opportunity for the other part of that pair to join in. So at the playground, parents can, if they can find a way to stand up and be active with their child instead of sitting at the side, on the bench, reading a paper or looking at their smartphone. There's just opportunities throughout the day that present themselves.
That's great. And there is a woman in my circle of colleagues named Linda Fogg Phillips. Some of you may know. She's B.J. Fogg's sister, if you know who B.J. is at Stanford, father of persuasive computing. Anyway, Linda Fogg Phillips is a mom, a wife, and has many, many children, and she's really involved in how do you promote active lifestyles within families. So you can follow her on Twitter and look at some of the work that she and her family have been doing as a collective group of familial researchers. So that's an exciting issue, though, getting families on the same page on this. Yolanda or, Stephanie, do you have any ideas on this topic in terms of family?
Sure, this is Stephanie. I can note what we've done in the past with the chalk program. We did try to offer some gym memberships to some parents for free at a local elementary school, and it didn't go so well. We couldn't get them to show up, but we had great success, and this is with we partnered with one of the local Ys in the neighborhood. We did have greater success with a family fitness night that actually included the parents and the kids in the physical activity. So, just to echo, including activities that have the entire family being active together, making it part of the schedule and routine and something fun, we were far more effective with. That's
great. Yolanda, how about on the walking front? You've seen families getting out?
I do, and I encourage it. I think it's something that families can do together. Personally, my family takes a walk after dinner each night, and I think these are some things that people can incorporate in what they do. After dinner, let's take a walk. It's just part of what you do, and I think that helps families, come together, and it also gives an opportunity to get some physical activity in. A quick walk around the block is very refreshing. So
that's great, and free, right?
And free,
we love that. When the family budget is tight, you can walk. Here's a question that's very near to a space where I spend a lot of time from our tweet stream. And it says, many people on our Twitter stream are ready to jump on a treadmill at work right now at one of those great treadmill desks. So the question is, what can employers do to encourage more activity around the office? Certainly, they can't all afford giant indoor playgrounds like some of the Silicon Alley tech companies who shall remain nameless, but we know who they are. So let's talk about the employer's role in motivating active lifestyle. And I will say something about this, but after all the four of you. So who would like to jump into company's role? Anybody have an opinion?
Well, I'm happy to lead off and just say, we actually, though we are New York Roadrunners, there's a tremendous culture here of email. And sometimes we find ourselves emailing people who are literally 5 feet or 10 feet away from us. And I think all companies have to reflect to the point of this question on how productive that is, and from both the social and physical health standpoint, that it's just better to stand up, and whether you're walking 5 feet or if you're in a big office, walking across the floor, or if you've got multiple floors, walking up and down the steps.
Great.
Because again, it may not be the fastest way to communicate, but collectively, the interaction between people face to face, the fact that you're getting up, you're walking, you're getting the heart pumping, can really make a difference in your energy levels. And I don't think we've yet touched on the fact that physical activity promotes cognition. That there's so many studies to the effect that when you're physically active, stuff is happening in your blood chemistry in your body that makes you literally smarter over the next few minutes. So it's wise for employers to promote that kind of physical activity, be it something as enhanced as a treadmill, or something as simple as just saying, hey, it doesn't all have to be about email. It can be about that walking over to your colleague and going face to face.
Sure. And Stephanie, you have a take on this.
Sure. I mean, there's simple design elements that don't require for you to rebuild your entire building. Setting it up so that your office workers actually have to walk around to the printer, to the water cooler, encouraging breaks instead of saying you only have 10 minutes to go to the bathroom. I use it as an example, the MTA telling its employees that it has 10 minutes only to go to the restroom. And on that note, really thinking out of the box about our rigid 9 to 5 work hours. I mean, is 1 hour of lunch really enough to eat, to be physically active, somehow get a workout routine in there? So being open to flex hours or rethinking that rigid 9 to 5 day. Also having things like incentives. If you have an employee that's really showing that they're going to the gym or they're being physically active, they get a free vacation day or two. Things like that. Having walking meetings instead of sitting down for an hour. If you don't need PowerPoint or anything like that, walk around the block. Or if you're a cool office and you have a walking track, walk inside. So thinking out of the box and moving beyond this sort of rigid 9 to 5 behind your desk mindset.
I love those walking meetings. I just had one in Washington a couple weeks ago around the Capitol, and it was inspiring, and we got a lot done. So I love that. Genevieve first, and then Yolanda. Genevieve, your take.
Well, I was just going to add, I'm actually taking part at the moment in the Robert Wood Johnson sponsored Active Living Research conference, and it's a great example of how you can integrate activity into a work setting. This conference is really practicing what it preaches. It's certainly not hypocritical in any way. There's stand-up breaks, that there's actually group-led activities in the middle of the conference where everyone's stretching and moving and dancing, and then there's actually opportunities to go biking.
Okay, let's move on to. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, just great networking opportunities as well.
Good. Yolanda?
I just wanted to quickly talk about walking meetings. I think they are definitely a great incentive to get people walking, and employers could adopt this. We will do walking meetings. This is part of our culture, and that's an opportunity to really get people moving. It's not stressful. You can talk about what you need to talk about and get a walk in as well. So I'm a big advocate for the walking meetings.
That's great. Let me just add something about employers and companies, because you wouldn't ordinarily get this in a TEDMED discussion, but more employers are moving towards something called value-based benefits, where it's carrot and stick. Cliff was talking about sticks a few minutes ago, and carrots. But in these new health plans that you're starting to see this year and ongoing into later 2013 and 2014, there are large wellness incentives in a lot of these programs, because employers are getting much smarter about the role of health, not just health care, for reducing their medical expenses. So we can look toward more incentives, more carrots to improve people, whether it's for walking or to use the treadmill desk down the hall in face-to-face meetings, or to use a gym. So look for those incentives to be much more artfully designed to push people. So there's another question that came up twice, once on the Facebook and Twitter stream last week and once this morning, and it's about the use of mobile apps, technologies, all the stuff that came out at the Consumer Electronics Show in terms of wristbands. I saw at least 50 wristband activity monitors in Las Vegas in January at that show, and wondered how are they all going to survive in the marketplace. What's all of your take on the use of devices to motivate and promote and sustain active lifestyles? Who wants to go first? Do any of you use any of these digital devices for your own health?
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Cliff.
Go ahead, Cliff.
Thank you, Rhonda. I'll jump in. Personally, I do often run with the GPS timer. And I'm old school. I'm sure I'm the oldest person on the panel, and in part, I do find it somewhat contradictory to be driven by technology to be a part of physical activity. But that said, I think it really comes down to whatever works, and obviously a generation of people who are growing up on technology and who fully incorporate that in their lives, if that's what's going to get them to incorporate physical activity in their lives as well, then I think we need to be supportive of that. Yet at the same time, just be mindful that we really don't deteriorate into that animated movie, which I think was called WALL-E.
That's right.
From a few years ago, where we are just so indebted to technology that nobody ever just does anything physically anymore, because that will be the end of the human race as we know it.
Mm-hmm. Yolanda?
I personally use a pedometer. I think it can be motivational. I think people can really look at their mobile apps or their devices and set goals and use that as a way to motivate them. Our younger generation will pull up a mobile app that kind of gives them some idea of where they are, how quickly it would take them to walk to the store, so things like that. So I think they have their place, and I think they can be useful. I think, like Cliff said, we don't want to be too dependent on it and not look up and check out the trees and look around us and see what's going on. We want to be safe as we're walking as well, but they definitely have a place.
Mm-hmm. Stephanie?
Oh, yeah, I just wanted to echo, they like Yolanda said, they definitely have their place. For some people it will work. I know that there's been studies that show that those using pedometers for walking around more, that show to be more effective at maintaining that as an activity. At the same time, it's not something that you need to be physically active, and I think that's the important point to remind people, because with all these marketed gadgets here and there, you sort of think, oh, I need this to be physically active. You really don't. But they can be effective. They can help, you set goals, but they're not necessarily needed for you to be active.
Mm-hmm. One insight I recently had talking with Dr. John Madison, who's the Chief Medical Information Officer at Kaiser Permanente. He has said that the mobile phone is the new wellness channel because it can accompany you in your pocket and provide a lot of support that way through text messaging and other kinds of support. And when we were talking about my use of one of these devices that I won't name, because it would be kind of a commercial, we both agreed, we both use this particular device, and it's not so much the device that keeps us honest with ourselves, but it creates a mindfulness that it's there, and in the back of our minds, we want to see the symbol on this device grow so that it's telling us by the end of the day we've done our job. Making ourselves healthy. So it does create kind of a consciousness, a mindfulness, I think, that can really be helpful. Genevieve, you want to say something?
Yeah, just wanted to add that as part of my research, we've been developing an app that uses the accelerometer within the mobile phone to prompt triggers and surveys to encourage people to be active. So it takes the phone's internal device and then uses that as a behavior change tool.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Hi there, this is Catherine from TEDMED. It looks like Jane, who's our moderator, we lost her a little bit, so I might jump in and do a quick bit of moderating until she comes back. But we actually had a great question from our Twitter community coming in. And I think this is a good transition coming in from talking about the messaging and the motivation and everything that works into this. So wondering, getting back to improving cognition about exercise, what are some of the positive psychological buttons we can be pushing more to get more folks moving? A doctor's warning necessarily doesn't seem to be super effective. What do we think about messaging? What's out there that's effective that gets people really going? Do any of you have any thoughts on that? Genevieve, do you have any research on anything like that?
Well, it's probably not a surprise that activity that's enjoyable is more rewarding and people are more likely to do it in the future. So I think the problem is, we often think of exercise as work, and if there's no pain, there's no gain, and I don't think that necessarily is the case. At least a lot of the research shows that people who have a positive emotional response to the activity are more likely to do it again. So it's just a matter of finding activities that you enjoy. It's pretty straightforward. It's not not rocket science, but I think we forget that.
Right.
That's a great point. Yolanda, do you have any thoughts on that? Or Stephanie, rather, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I can go after Yolanda.
Oh, Yolanda, I think you're muted. Go ahead and turn yourself back on.
Yeah, I am. Thanks a lot. You know, I think we want to promote this as something that is fun and exciting, not just one more thing to add to our day. And I think that's, you know, that's not motivational for people to say, after I've worked 10 hours, now I have to exercise. But how do we integrate it? How do we make it part of what we do? And I also think it's an integrated approach. I don't think one discipline, whether it's medical or political or social, can say that we have to do things in a certain way. It has to come from a variety of sectors to make physical activity, active transportation, walking, appeal to everyone and make it more accessible and interesting to people. So it's definitely an integrated approach.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And Stephanie, go ahead. What were your thoughts?
Sure, and when looking at what motivates us, again, it's highly personal, and the bottom line is, do whatever it takes to move you, whatever's enjoyable. But if you look at the literature review and you look at different age groups, we know that for kids, it's really fun and enjoyment that motivates them. For teens, it's more personal fulfillment, appearance issues, peer and parental pressure that influences physical activity. As we get older into adults, enjoyment, appearance, health concerns, and then for older adults, it might be more about health concerns, socialization, and staff connections. So really tailoring, marketing messages to specific groups and finding out what moves you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Cliff, I imagine you might have something to say about the marketing, and I think you might be muted, but we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
And I think those are all great points. Obviously, from our perspective, we think a lot of it starts with the kids, which is to say a lot of it starts with the schools because that's where all the kids are. Again, the diminishment of PE in the schools has been a huge takeaway from our society over the last 30 years. Actually, I think the First Lady is perhaps coming out with a big speech, perhaps even as we speak today, about promoting physical education in the schools, and hopefully that's going to help turn the tide on that. But we need to teach kids, if you will, or certainly by exposing kids to physical activity and physical education that is fun, that does not just seem like it's another boring class that I have to go to in school, and this is going to hurt, or this is going to be something that I'm not going to enjoy. There are so many young, creative physical education teachers who are out there who are trying to buck the trend, and if we can turn kids on to physical activity in their youth, it's something they can carry with them for the rest of their lives, and that takes a commitment from society and a realization that kids who are, and there's so many studies out there to this effect, the kids who are more physically fit actually perform better in school, do better on the standardized tests, and we really need, I think, as a nation to advocate for that and realize that if we're not giving kids physical education, no matter how well they may read, write, and do math, if they're going to get type 2 diabetes in their 30s, what's the point?
That's some great comments. And I think it's actually a good transition into thinking about a sort of a double-pronged question. One, why does the love of physical activity sort of diminish a little bit as we get older? And also, how can we get older folks in on the action? It's never too late to get started with physical activity, but it's something that often gets lost in geriatric care. So we spent a lot of time talking about children, but do any of you have some thoughts about motivating older folks to get involved with physical activity? Stephanie, what do you think?
Sure. I mean, just to go a little bit back in time, we know, again, looking at some of the literature, that this love diminishes around the age 16, where we might have things like self-esteem, peer pressure, physical activity becomes more competitive instead of just something that's fun and enjoyable. Not my expertise, the elderly population, but for sure, emphasizing the socialization quality of physical activity tends to be something that is a good motivator. And also those personal connections, particularly if it's elderly that are institutionalized or participating in some type of senior center, but having those one-on-one connections where the instructor is engaging or the activity is actually engaging, those become important. And of course, tailored to that specific age group and the health concerns of the population.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yolanda, do you have any thoughts about this?
I do. I've actually had an opportunity to work with older adults, and I think one of the major reasons they are interested in staying physically active is to maintain independence. And
Hi. Okay, now I got to put my headset on. Thank you.
is to
We'll come
maintain
back to
their.
you real quick.
Okay.
She's back. Sorry.
Okay, I'll just continue. I was answering the question, Jane, about maintaining independence for older adults. And I think in addition to that, aging in place is really important, and having access to walkable places. They can walk to the store. They can walk to the pharmacy. Those things are very important for someone who's older. Having access to those types of facilities is really important.
And what's interesting at a panel that I attended, an interesting discussion came up regarding active design and making it so that it's hard to drive a car and park a car and et cetera, and those that had a concern about the elderly population. And I think this is something that remains a discussion on how to create active designs in the built environment that also accommodate those that it's not as easy to get around on foot.
You know, if I can jump in.
Please.
Yeah, we do work with senior, we lead senior walks as well as the youth work, and I think to the point Yolanda was making, it's a great opportunity for socialization for seniors, and it really does get down to, at almost any phase in life, but obviously more so in the elderly years, it's your body, use it or lose it. So I think actually seniors are motivated to walk and get outside and exercise for the socialization, for the realization that they really need to medically. I think one of the things we talked about before, safety, though, becomes a very important aspect to the elderly, and making sure there are secure places for the elderly to get out and exercise, and in particular walking, which is such a great exercise, such an accessible and free exercise, is really important. To Stephanie's point, we certainly see that as well, that as kids advance into their later teens, that is where you see a drop-off in physical activity. But again, if you can turn them on at a young age, hopefully they can push through that and continue. Or the other thing we see with a lot of adult runners and New York runners is maybe they did take a hiatus in their later years. Maybe they weren't all that active in college or post-college when they're early in the workforce. But then they get to be 30 or 40, the doctor's saying, hey, you know, you've got to lose some weight, or you just look down and realize if you don't see your shoes when you want to tie your laces, and you realize you've got to do something, and you go back to the sports, to the activities that you enjoyed when you were a child.
That's neat. We have a question about international comparisons. Are there other countries that you know of who do a better job at promoting activity and built environments? I can think of one, and that's whenever I'm in Amsterdam in the Netherlands, people bike to work. They cycle, they walk, and in Europe in general, there's lots and lots of walking, and of course, high streets in England where people live close to the downtown, which is basically a few blocks from home. What are your all experiences and knowledge about the area of built environments and promoting healthy lifestyles overseas? Anyone have ideas? No? Okay, well, I answered that question. Now here's one, a great question from Malia Fry on Twitter. Are physicians informed about prescribing exercise, and do they do it? Any of you work with the health system, providers and doctors?
Sure, I can answer it, Stephanie. Sure. Yes, some of our physicians are pioneers and do prescribe physical activity. You know, my husband being one of them as a primary care physician, and also working with a great team in the past at Columbia University New York Presbyterian. But at the same time, having these pioneering physicians that do include that in their patient counseling is a challenge when that's not something that you're reimbursed for. You're reimbursed for blood tests, for prescribing this, that, and the other. There isn't a market that's within the medical institutions to actually prescribe preventive care. So there's a lot of work that we need to do there. And also, you know, again, just in my own personal work up here, there's a big disconnect. It's easy to write down on a piece of paper, you know, you should be physically active 1 hour every day. Really, where? Is my neighborhood safe? Oh, really? I should ride a bike. You know, it's kind of dangerous. There's no bike lanes. So really having these institutions such as hospitals or universities partner better with the communities, and also redefining what it means to do community outreach. It's not just about educating and writing cute pamphlets about this is what you should do, but how do we transform the environment of these communities so that they can actually practice this medicine?
Mm-hmm. That was great. Thank you. Any other opinions on that?
You know, I just want to jump in behind Stephanie. Great point. I think that this is such a great opportunity. I feel so privileged to be a part of this panel and be a part of this conversation. But as someone who competes for grants, when we review the funding opportunities, there are so few that really support direct programs and the kind of activities that you can engage people in to get them moving. And perhaps Genevieve might disagree with me, but I see a lot of funding opportunities that speak to the kind of work you're doing about the kind of theoretical framework around building out communities and environment from more of a theoretical standpoint where, you know, we've got to get to the point where yes, we want to continue learning and pushing at the theories, but you know what? We've got to really invest some money into the programs and making the changes so that there are bike lanes, so that there is money for physical education in schools, so that there are leagues for kids to play in and adults to play in and for seniors to get engaged, so that it goes beyond the conversation and really gets right back to where we all need to be, which is engaged in the activity. Great. Genevieve?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, there is, you know, the NIH has done a good job of funding the basic behavioral science and trying to understand mechanisms of behavior change, and certainly a number of successful interventions and behavior change programs have been developed out of NIH funding. And the challenge, and NIH is very aware of this, NIH is the National Institutes of Health, sorry, just want to explain. So the challenge is in the dissemination and implementation of these programs, of these evidence-based programs, and that's a whole science in itself. So that there are, you know, it's trying to just to make people aware of these evidence-based programs and find ways to help get the word out and adopt them, which isn't always easy. So there's often funding for the basic science, but the dissemination is the challenge.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm. So our Surgeon General, Regina Benjamin, who I love, talks about health being where we live, work, play, and pray. It's not in the doctor's office. It's in all these places where we are. And so one aspect we haven't talked about, which isn't about activity but relates to promoting healthy lifestyles, is food. So I know several of you work in this area in terms of food as a complement to health. Genevieve, Stephanie especially. Can you talk a little bit about that quickly? You know, what's the role of that in promoting a healthy lifestyle?
Sure, Jen. I guess I can go first.
Thanks.
I mean, my work definitely derives from childhood obesity prevention. So,
right.
you know, the two things that go hand in hand are physical activity and healthful eating. You know, one thing that we did, I mean, just a clear example of where you can make a connection between the two. You know, bringing a new farmers market, for example, into a neighborhood is a great way to increase a healthy food resource, but also promote active living. Having something that's there, you can, you know, create walking groups to go there, getting people outside of the office. So there's just many ways that the two complement each other, just to start the conversation off.
Great. And Genevieve?
Yeah, it is. The relationship between, you know, eating and physical activity obviously is complex, and you can't really talk about one without the other. So I'm glad that we're at least addressing this briefly, but one thing that research is showing that access to any food outlet regardless of whether it's a fast food outlet or a grocery store which has healthy foods. Access to any food outlet in one's neighborhood does increase obesity risk. So that, we talk about wanting to have access to shops and destinations to walk to, but if you're walking to them to buy something that's unhealthy, we have to be aware of the trade-off there. So I don't think we have the answer yet, but I just think that we need to be aware that this isn't as easy as we think. That what we find is that children in neighborhoods that don't have any food stores actually have lower obesity risk, even if regardless of whether they were healthy grocery stores or.
Right. And Yolanda, I know you want to add to that.
I do. Thank you, Jane. I just want to say that we do find that these challenges seem to be in communities of color and communities with lower socioeconomic statuses. And I would like to see the conversation evolve in the future where we look at both of these and how we approach, no access to safe communities and the lack of good food, and look at that together. I think that's a conversation. We sometimes separate the two, but I think they're definitely connected.
So Stephanie, if you can riff on that for a minute on the issue of health disparities, which Yolanda's raising here.
Sure. Interwoven with the question of disparities is the complexity of poverty. So when looking at issues looking at areas, communities, particularly communities of color where there's a significantly less amount of resources to physical activity, one of the things I always like to do is take an assets-based approach rather than deficit. So what exists in these communities that we can actually tap into? There's surely elementary schools in there that can be opened in after hours for their gyms to be used. Playgrounds can be kept open. I know that poses a litigation concern for some of the principals that don't like to keep their schools open after hours. Maintaining the rec centers of those areas that might be the only thing in the area, and really keeping our parks attractive and safe. And safety is, I think, a really key issue, again, coming from also personal experience on what can really decide whether you go to that dance class or you go to the gym or you take that walk. So I think that in addressing disparities and looking at issues of poverty, it really needs to be a complex discussion that involves multiple sectors of society so that we can see sort of an even ground in physical activity.
Great. We only have about 2 minutes left, so the last question, which has to be quick, is about this mind-body connection we've been talking about. So certain kinds of movement, yoga or Tai Chi, may promote brain health. Cliff, you brought this up earlier, so I'm going to let you have the last word on mind-body brain health.
Well, we just get so much feedback from teachers, from parents, from principals, and from the kids themselves that when they exercise and are more physically active, they feel better. They're better students, they're more focused, they're uplifted as people. And I think any of us who exercise know that feeling of rejuvenation from the exercise. And it's just, it's about getting back to where we all started from. Yolanda said something before when we were talking about technology, going out for a walk and not just being focused on your technology. Look at the stars. We have gotten away from our intrinsic nature.
Yeah.
And that's what physical activity is all about. And that's why it really does serve the whole person.
That's great. Let's all be Thoreau and take a walk. So I have some wrap-up material, and when I'm done, all four of us and I are going to get up and do a little dance because the Surgeon General wants us to do 30 seconds of that. So let me do some official script first, and that's to say first, thank you to all of you. We could have talked about this for hours. I can't believe the hour is up. But we also want to share that March is National Nutrition Month. So on Monday, March 4th, First Lady Michelle Obama is joining her first fireside hangout with Kelly Ripa to discuss Let's Move, her initiative to ensure all our children grow up healthy and reach their full potential through active lifestyles. Amen. We hope you'll join this event and keep the great challenges momentum going. Our conversation today will continue on TEDMED.com on the Great Challenge page for promoting active lifestyles. So share your reflections on what we talked about today and ask new questions there. Go to the TEDMED Facebook page or the Twitter at hashtag Great Challenges. Everybody's opinions welcome, of course. Join us today for our next live event at 3:30 Eastern. Finding wellness programs that work, to that question about corporate wellness. And finally, thank you all 4 of you were so great, generously sharing your time. We also want to thank Robert Wood Johnson Foundation again for sponsoring the program. Now everyone get moving and let's get up and dance. Come on, everybody. Thank you all. I'm going to dance.
Oh, that's a nice one.
First